Rock's greatest stories, all in one podcast. Here's one from a recent episode of Booked on Rock. Samira Ahmed is the author of A Hard Day's Night, part of the British Film Institute's Film Classics series. The book examines one of the most influential music films ever made, A Hard Day's Night. That Can't Buy Me Love sequence is classic. It's such a great representation of youth, breaking free from authority and tradition. It's still there when you watch it. Probably the most iconic of all the scenes from the film. You call it the most complex in the entire film. What makes it so much more sophisticated than it first appears?
Well, I love that it's actually shot in 3 different locations, weeks apart, because, you just assume that it's just all in the editing. But the scene where they come out on the fire escape and they go, "We're out," that's one location. That's the Hammersmith Odeon in West London, as it was, an old cinema. And then they run down that fire escape. And then when they're running across the field, that was shot in Isleworth near Heathrow Airport. In fact, a community group got in touch with them. They did a screening of the film in those same playing fields just the other weekend to mark, Paul McCartney's birthday, which was lovely because the playing fields are still a place you can visit. I've been there. But the other location is Gatwick Airport, London's second airport. And they basically had a helicopter. And if you think about it, when they first seem to run into the field, you're very aware that it's a juddery shot. It's the helicopter going up. And that's where they were shot from a distance, running around, larking in the field. And what's interesting is that was, in a way, the first part of the sequence that was shot. But the cameraman was an experienced military cameraman who'd shot a lot in planes. He'd shot air raids over Germany and stuff for Winston Churchill. And the footage was sent to number 10 Downing Street for him to monitor what was going on. So he'd gone up in the helicopter. And when he got up, he realized that the battery in the camera was run down. So the footage was running through at low speed. So when you played it back at normal speed, it had that speeded up silent movie slapstick effect. So they shot the rest of the stuff kind of to match it. So Richard Lester was very good at responding to an accident and saying, well, let's make this a feature, because he loved Buster Keaton. There's a whole sequence, a chase sequence later with the policeman, which is based on Cops, the 1922 Buster Keaton film. So they shoot the stuff at in the playing field later, and they mock up a version of the helipad so it looks like it's the same location. And they speed up the footage. But those are 3 different locations shot weeks apart. And at one point, John Lennon isn't even there because they used to film, despite the fact that they all had other commitments. And John Lennon went off to a literary luncheon for his first book. And so there's moments when they seem to be doing like a do-si-do on the helipad. And the camera is being held by what you assume is John. And he points the camera down at his feet in his Beatle boots. That's Richard Lester. So sometimes he substitutes himself for the missing Beatle. So you wouldn't know any of this unless you went looking for the information. And I read a lot of interviews that he'd done with people like Steven Soderbergh, accounts he'd given at previous screenings, because Richard Lester is very much still alive, but just very frail, and he still lives in England. And I think more than anything, I wanted this book to be a homage to him as an American who made Britain his home. And together with the American producers of this film, I love that it took a trio of Americans to give the Beatles back to Britain and the world as the most exciting new British phenomenon.
Yeah, I wonder how much of A Hard Day's Night owes its magic to accidents, like you mentioned, like the sped up film effect, only because the camera battery is running low, and that Richard Lester was smart enough to keep. I mean, how much of the movie has those moments?
A lot has it. And I think one of the best of those moments is within the first 2 or 3 seconds of the opening film, when you suddenly start with that chord of the opening track. And you see through the Beatles are running down that alley next to Marylebone Station, and George trips over and falls flat, hard on his face. Ringo lands on top of him. They get up and they keep running, and that happens a couple of times, things like that. In that whole sequence, there's a lot of fans falling over quite badly in the crush. So you have that sense there's real peril, there's real jeopardy. If they hadn't got up and run again, would they be able to shoot that sequence? Everything's shot as fast as it can be, because they never know when the police are going to shut down shooting, as they sometimes did. They said the crowds are too big, or the crowd might get out of control. And, they had a moment after the first day's shooting on the train where the young technician who was carrying the cans of film looked a bit like a Beatle, and he started being chased by girls, and he tried to outrun them, and he dropped a load of the film, and they had to abandon some of the tape that got lost. So the whole film has a sense of urgency about it. And there's another moment when they're rehearsing a number in the studio, when George leans on his amp, and it kind of starts to almost fall off its stand, and you actually hear the thump of it. So I think all that adds to a sense of authenticity, doesn't it? That he left all these accidents in.
Maybe that's why it stands up so well over time as well, because there are those real moments. You suggested A Hard Day's Night helped create the modern music video. When people talk about the birth of MTV, modern music video, does the Can't Buy Me Love sequence deserve to be at that center of the conversation?
I think it does. And in fact, even before that, the very first pop video, I'd argue, is when they're on the train and they go into that guard's carriage and they're playing cards and the music starts up of I Should Have Known Better, I think it is, isn't it? And if you watch that sequence, it's the first time in cinema that you start to hear the song before you see them singing or performing it. And then it suddenly jump cuts to them in the same seats, but they're playing instruments. We take it for granted that pop videos work this way. No one had ever done this before. It's all in the editing, the way that Paul even looks like he's miming along or jiggling his head to hearing the song on the radio. And the next moment he's singing it out loud. And then the Can't Buy Me Love sequence is the kind of, it's arguably the inspiration for the Monkees. I mean, the whole TV show spins out of these running, zany foursome of guys playing around in a field in a slapstick way. There's a huge amount of slapstick in 60s pop music cinema, even before the MTV comes along. And I find it quite ironic, Eric, that MTV has basically been shutting down across Europe. It's, very much in retreat. And that this film has outlived the art form that it invented. I mean, they famously gave him a Vanguard Award in 1984 as the father of the pop video, and he jokingly demanded a paternity test. But he's outlived his child.
Yeah,
I think, and the other one I'd point out, looking ahead a bit, because I looked at the other films that they made, and including Help, which was their follow-up with Richard Lester. Those films all shot the pop music treatments in that film in the studio with the cigarette smoke sort of filtered through blue lights, or they're in the Bahamas with these beautiful girls, all again shot through beautiful sunlight. I mean, that anticipates all the Duran Duran exotic videos of the 1980s, like Rio, doesn't it?
Hear the full episode wherever you get your podcasts.